All right, hey everyone, and welcome back. Ready for another deep dive.
Absolutely. Always ready to explore.
So today we're tackling something I know a lot of you have been curious about, breaking free from those pesky negative patterns.
Yeah, those things can really hold you back, huh?
Oh, absolutely, and it's something we all deal with to some extent, right? I mean, who hasn't struggled with procrastination or, maybe getting stuck in a less than ideal relationship?
Right. Those are classic examples for sure.
And thankfully, it seems like everyone's talking about personal growth these days, which is great because it means there are more resources than ever to help us break free.
Definitely. And one resource we found that really digs deep into this is the Inner Balance Red Print podcast.
Yeah, they have some really insightful stuff. So for today's deep dive, we're going to pull some key takeaways from their episodes on negative patterns. Our mission, to understand those patterns from inside out and figure out how to actually break free.
Sounds like a plan. Let's get into it.
All right, so first things first, Inner Balance Red Print defines negative patterns as repetitive thoughts, behaviors, or emotional responses that ultimately don't serve us.
Right. They're like those default settings in our brains that keep playing out even when we know they're not helpful.
Exactly, like hitting the replay button on a song you're kind of tired of hearing.
Haha. Yeah, a perfect analogy.
And they give some really relatable examples in the podcast. We already mentioned procrastination, but they also talk about things like toxic relationships, self-doubt, overspending, and unhealthy eating habits. I mean, that pretty much covers the whole spectrum, right?
It does. It really highlights how these patterns can show up in every area of our lives. And one of the first things Inner Balance Red Print emphasizes is the importance of awareness.
Yeah, that makes sense. You can't really change something if you don't even realize it's happening, right?
Right, exactly. It's about tuning in and paying attention to those thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that keep cropping up. And what's really fascinating is that a lot of these patterns are rooted in our subconscious.
Ooh, that's interesting. So it's not just about making a conscious choice to change. It's about understanding what's going on beneath the surface.
Exactly. You see, our past experiences, especially those early childhood experiences, shaped our beliefs and create these patterns of thinking and behaving. It's like our subconscious is trying to protect us based on what it learned way back when.
So it's almost like those patterns were once helpful in a way, but now they're holding us back.
Precisely. And it's interesting because Inner Balance Red Print draws a parallel to how our brains form habits, which is super insightful.
Yeah, because, I mean, we all know how hard it is to break a bad habit, right?
It is, and there's a scientific reason for that. Every time we repeat a thought or behavior, we're actually strengthening the neural pathways in our brains. It's like carving a deeper groove in a record so the needle keeps falling into the same track.
Wow, so it's literally rewiring our brains.
It is, and that's why it can feel so hard to break free from those negative patterns. But the good news is that our brains are also incredibly adaptable. We can create new pathways with conscious effort and repetition.
Okay, so that makes sense, but it still kind of begs the question, why do we stay stuck even when we know it's not good for us? I mean, sometimes it feels like self-sabotage.
It's a great question and one that I think we all grapple with at some point. And Inner Balance Red Print identifies three key reasons that really resonated with me.
Ooh, I'm all ears, lay it on me.
All right, so number one is comfort zones.
Okay, that one's pretty self-explanatory, right? We like what's familiar, even if it's not necessarily healthy.
Exactly. It's like our brains crave predictability and routine. Even if that routine involves negative thoughts or behaviors, it feels safer than venturing into the unknown.
I can definitely relate to that. It's like sticking with that same old boring job, even though you're completely miserable.
Right? It's the fear of change and the unknown that keeps us stuck. And the second reason Inner Balance Red Print highlights is those pesky neural pathways we were just talking about.
Right, those superhighways in our brains that are paved with bad habits.
Exactly. And the more we travel down those pathways, the stronger they become. So it takes conscious effort to create new neural pathways that support positive change.
Okay, so we've got comfort zones and neural pathways. What's the third reason?
The third one is something they call emotional reinforcement.
Hmm, I'm intrigued. What's that all about?
Well, it's the idea that negative patterns often have some sort of emotional payoff, even if it's fleeting. For instance, you might procrastinate on a big project to avoid feeling overwhelmed or anxious.
Oh yeah, that's definitely me.
But here's the thing, that temporary relief actually reinforces the procrastination pattern in your brain.
Ah, so it's like we're rewarding ourselves for staying stuck.
Precisely. And that emotional reinforcement makes it even harder to break free.
Okay, so we've got a pretty clear picture of why we get stuck in these negative patterns, but the big question is, how do we actually break free? That's the part I'm really eager to dig into.
Well, you're in luck because Inner Balance Red Print offers some really practical strategies that anyone can use.
Yes. Let's hear them.
So they outline 6 key strategies, and I think we should break down each one.
Perfect, let's do it.
All right, so strategy number 1 is all about awareness and journaling.
Ah, yes, the detective work we talked about earlier.
Exactly. It's about paying close attention to your thoughts, feelings, and behaviors and noticing when those negative patterns show up. Journaling is a great tool for this because it allows you to track your triggers, emotional responses, and even potential alternative actions.
So it's like creating a map of your own personal pattern landscape.
That's a great way to put it. And once you have that map, you can start to navigate it more effectively.
I love that. Okay, so what's strategy number 2?
Strategy number 2 is all about reframing your mindset.
Ah, so it's about changing the way we think about those negative patterns.
Exactly. Inner Balance Red Print is big on the power of positive affirmations.
Oh yeah, affirmations. I've heard about those. But do they actually work?
Well, the idea is that by consciously choosing to focus on positive thoughts and beliefs, we can actually rewire our brains.
So it's like replacing those negative tapes that are playing in our heads with something more uplifting.
Precisely. And the podcast even suggests using visualization techniques to create a new, more empowering self-image.
Interesting. So like picturing yourself succeeding in breaking those patterns.
Exactly. Visualization can be a really powerful tool for change.
Okay, so we've got journaling and affirmations. What's next on the list?
All right, strategy number 3 is a really interesting one. Instead of trying to eliminate a bad habit, you focus on replacing it with something positive.
Well, that makes sense because sometimes it feels like those bad habits have a mind of their own right.
They do. So instead of fighting them head on, you outsmart them by giving your brain a more rewarding alternative.
So like if you're prone to stress eating, you might swap that bag of chips for a 5-minute meditation session.
Exactly. Or if you find yourself constantly checking social media, you might replace that with reading a book or going for a walk. It's all about finding healthy alternatives that actually feel good.
So you're not just depriving yourself, you're actually enriching your life with positive experiences.
Exactly. And strategy number 4 is all about taking things one step at a time. Inner Balance Red Print really emphasizes the importance of small, consistent changes.
Yeah, I think that's a crucial point because it's easy to get overwhelmed when you're trying to overhaul your entire life, right?
It is, and that's where the 1% rule comes in.
The 1% rule, what's that?
It's the idea that if you improve just 1% each day, you'll see significant progress over time. It's about those small wins that build momentum and keep you motivated.
Ah, so it's like compound interest, but for personal growth.
Exactly, and it's a much more sustainable approach than trying to do everything at once.
Makes sense. All right, what's strategy number 5?
Number 5 is all about seeking support and accountability.
Yeah, because let's face it, going it alone can be tough, right?
It is, and that's why Inner Balance Red Print encourages us to tap into our support systems, whether that's a therapist, coach, mentor, or even a group of friends who are also on a personal growth show.
It's like having a cheering squad for your own personal transformation.
Exactly, and having someone to check in with can make a huge difference in terms of staying motivated and on track.
Okay, so we got one more strategy to go. What's number 6?
All right, number 6 is all about cultivating mindfulness and incorporating practices like meditation.
Ah, mindfulness. That's a big buzzword these days, right?
It is, and for good reason. Mindfulness is all about paying attention to the present moment without judgment.
So it's like hitting the pause button on those racing thoughts. It's just observing what's happening without getting swept away by it.
Exactly, and meditation is a fantastic tool for developing mindfulness. Inner Balance Red Print talks about how meditation can actually help rewire our brains, reducing stress and increasing our capacity for self-awareness.
So it's like giving our brains a much-needed spa day.
Haha, I love that analogy.
So we've covered a lot of ground here. We talked about what negative patterns are, why they're so hard to break, and 6 powerful strategies for breaking free. But I think the question on everyone's mind right now is, where do we even begin?
It can feel overwhelming, right?
It can. So what's the first step?
Well, Inner Balance Red Print suggests picking just one negative pattern to focus on initially. Don't try to tackle everything at once. Choose the one that feels most pressing or the one that's having the biggest impact on your life right now.
Right. Focus on one thing at a time.
Exactly. And then remember those detective skills we talked about earlier. Journaling, tracking your triggers, and experimenting with those positive replacements.
So it's all about those baby steps and those small victories.
Absolutely. It's a journey, not a race. Be kind to yourself, celebrate every step forward, and remember, progress, not perfection, is the key.
I love that. So to sum it all up, those negative patterns, they're often rooted in our subconscious programming and reinforced by those well-worn neural pathways in our own emotional responses. But the good news is we're not powerless. By understanding these patterns, reframing our mindset, and using those practical strategies from Inner Balance Red Point, we can absolutely break free and create lasting positive change.
It all starts with that decision to take control and the willingness to experiment and see what works best for you.
So to leave you with some food for thought, What's one small change you could make today to start shifting a negative pattern? Doesn't have to be huge, just something to get the ball rolling. And remember, even the tiniest action can create a ripple effect. Keep exploring, keep experimenting, and who knows what amazing transformations await you on the other side. Until next time, happy pattern breaking.
See you next time.